I am not really attached to you at all. I am merely deluding myself into the belief that without you, I will not be happy. Anthony DeMello. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Nishant, and welcome to another episode of the Nishant Garg Show. This show is about extracting information on mindfulness, meditation, and personal development. I am on a mission to spread mindfulness awareness, and please join me in this movement. My today's guest is Grace Edmunds. She has over 15 years of dedicated practice in meditation and mindfulness practices. Grace is on the teaching team for the Simple Habit app, as well as at the Beech Institute in West Hartford. She successfully completed studies with the Mindfulness Training Institute and is a certified teacher for Search Inside Yourself, a mindfulness and emotional intelligence program developed at Google with top neuroscientists, business leaders, and mindfulness teachers. Grace has worked with Fortune 500 companies, Ivy League schools, and multinational nonprofits to bring mindfulness practices to an array of communities around the world. She has also taught meditation in Nepal, India, and other countries. So, how would you explain emotional intelligence to somebody who is not aware of this concept? Because we, in schools and colleges, we are not taught about emotional intelligence. We always talk about being intelligent. IQ, we talk about IQ level, we never talk about EQ. But EQ is becoming the main foundation of our life. And that's where we create self awareness, self empowerment. So, my question is, how would you generate emotional intelligence in somebody?
So first thing first, in my opinion, mindfulness is the base for emotional intelligence because mindfulness is a particular way of paying attention and being with our experience with kindness and curiosity that lends us to any type of internal self-development or self-awareness. And I like to think of EQ as kind of the relative of IQ, but it's considering our whole self. So it's considering our emotions and it's considering interpersonal relationships. It's oftentimes described as a soft skill. And, I teach a lot of leaders, and the more I talk to leaders, the more it's very apparent that EQ and emotional intelligence and these soft skills are actually what help leaders thrive. So, yeah.
Exactly. And that's where leaders or any human being can connect on a human level. When we are
Exactly.
expressing empathy, compassion, it means we are emotionally aware, we are emotionally intelligent. And there is always a new level to get deeper into this emotional intelligence. And I think this will really benefit in recovering from our failures and in creating more balance in our day to day life. So, I would like to ask you, how do you recover from a failure in your life, our day to day life?
Yeah, so with failures, it's an interesting thing. And I think this word failure has such a negative connotation in our culture. And so I like to think of it as a setback rather than a failure. And I have had many setbacks in my life. And, my mindfulness practice has given me the ability to look at those setbacks as setbacks rather than absolute failures, to see them clearly as they were without this flood of inner criticism that holds me back. And I think of this one moment in at the very beginning of my career as a mindfulness teacher. I was teaching, I think I had been teaching mindfulness for only a few months at this point. So I was brand new. I had worked with a few clients doing corporate mindfulness. And then I finally got this one client, and I was super excited because he wanted me to teach his team for multiple sessions. And I had flown down to Orange County. I was living up in the Bay Area at that time. And I'd flown down, and I gave this presentation on mindfulness and on compassion as well. And at the end of the session, I just felt like it flopped. I felt like it was the worst mindfulness presentation in the history of mindfulness presentations. I thought to myself that it was the worst of the worst. And I left that training and I went to my hotel, I grabbed my bag and went to the airport, got all the way to my gate, and I was just having this strong internal critical dialogue that was so strong that I forgot my bag at the security. and I had this moment when I was about to get on the plane where I just laughed at myself and at the experience. Here I am, a mindfulness teacher who has such a strong inner critic. And, I finally had this light bulb of self-awareness that actually led me, luckily to do a lot more work in self-compassion and a lot more observation of my inner critic and my inner dialogue that was really harmful.
Yeah, thank you for explaining this experience. Mindfulness doesn't mean that we will not have problems in our life. We will have so many problems, complex problems in our life. It just means that we can deal with our problems with ease and calmness. We can learn from our setbacks / failures and try to do something in a more natural and more loving way and be more compassionate towards us and towards others. So in your experience, when you lost your bag and when you felt that this presentation is totally a flop, then you were practicing self-compassion towards yourself. Can you please elaborate more on the self-compassion concept?
Yes. So I think it was that moment that I realized I needed more of it, and I needed a little bit of guidance and a little bit of practical application of the practice of self-awareness. And so after that experience, when I realized how much the inner critic was in control, really, was navigating my life.
An inner critic is negative self-talk?
Yes, the inner critic is negative self-talk. It's that person or that voice inside that says, oh, you're so terrible. That was horrible. They all hate you. You're the worst meditation teacher there's ever been on the planet.
And I strongly feel that all this negative self-talk comes from our old belief system, old conditioning and programming.
Yes, we have been conditioned in a certain way to be deeply critical of ourselves. And I think that there is some benefit to self-analysis, but not a lot of benefit to self-criticism in the way that really was crippling for me, actually. It was holding me back from pursuing more clients, from actually teaching mindfulness more often. And so self-compassion has been such a huge practice for me. And I love the practice that Tara Brach offers, and it's called the Rain of Self-Compassion. And
what is that practice?
So it's a meditation practice. It can also be done in the moment. And it's another acronym. I love the acronyms. So the acronym stands for recognize. So just in this first moment when you're feeling, for me, it's self-criticism, when I need the self-compassion a lot. So if I'm feeling like I'm just the worst meditation teacher there's ever been, then I recognize how that feels, on a visceral level. How am I feeling? And then I is investigate. So, oh, sorry, I missed A. So A is allow. Instead of pushing away the emotion or the experience or trying to kind of hide it or pretend it's not there, the invitation is to just simply allow the experience to be exactly as it is. And then I is investigate. So you can investigate by noticing how your body feels, noticing the emotions that are present, noticing the story that you're telling yourself, and then questioning also if that story is accurate. Am I really the worst meditation teacher on the planet? Was that really the worst? Really taking yourself out of the story and giving yourself a little bit of perspective. And then N is nurture. And nurture depends on what you need in the moment, but it might look like placing your hand on your heart and saying a few words of kindness to yourself, like, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah,
I'm here.
this is a profound framework that anybody can apply in any challenging situation. But before we can apply this framework, we need to have some level of self awareness and really
Mm,
feeling what we are feeling in a moment and taking a pause, slowing down. And, when we slow down, then we allow our emotions to really feel and then apply this framework.
yes, exactly.
So, how do you find opportunity in challenging times? Because I have read so many books, and everybody talks about challenging times, sufferings. They are a growth opportunity. You are going to learn something about that or something from that. So, when somebody is in a tough, challenging situation, how they can find purpose and opportunity in that?
Mm. Yeah, I think it depends on the situation. There's many practices that we can apply when we're facing difficult moments. One practice that I love to just get a little bit of distance from the challenging experience that I'm having is journaling. So if I'm having a difficult problem or if I've experienced a setback of some kind, and then I like to journal about it and then read what I've journaled, because sometimes when we give ourselves a little bit of distance, it's almost like reading our mind a bit when we're reading what we journal. And we can see what's going on in our mind and see if we really want to fully believe everything that our mind is telling us.
Yeah,
And
exactly. And I was reading this book called Authentic Happiness. And the author is saying that whatever beliefs we have, they are not accurate all the time. They are not
Mhm.
facts. So we need to learn to argue with our beliefs. And this is exactly what you're saying. When we are journaling, we are writing our thoughts and everything on a piece of paper and reading it and then analyzing it.
Exactly. You don't have to believe everything you think. This is definitely one of the greatest lessons I've ever learned from the practice of meditation.
And this question comes to my mind right now. How would you know what you're thinking is not correct?
Hmm. I think that you have to turn to the body, because if what you're thinking is harmful in some way, you'll feel it in your body. If you are speaking bad about yourself, and you'll feel it by feeling uncomfortable or anxious or numb. I think the body has so much intelligence and wisdom that we oftentimes overlook. And the practice of mindfulness is to look at that and to allow what's there to be there. And in in terms of what you want to believe and what you don't, it's the same as if you were talking to someone else, and choosing what you want to believe. If someone else was berating you, you would say, okay, I'm not going to believe that about myself because I know that that isn't helpful for me. It's not of benefit.
Exactly. When somebody says negative to us or if somebody is critical to us, we always fight back.
Mm.
But when we are criticizing ourselves, when we are having negative self-talk, we never argue with ourselves. And that
Yeah.
is the main distinction. That if we can, and for that distinction, we get to be emotionally intelligent,
Mm.
to really challenge our own beliefs, to really challenge our inner critic.
Yeah. And I think it really comes down to our values and our intention and how we want to live. So, and this is a deeper sense of self awareness and questioning that I think everyone should go through, because the more you know about yourself and your values, the more you can live in alignment with them. So, if one of your values is compassion and care, that can't just apply to others, it has to also apply to yourself. And so, if you're saying something to yourself that's not in alignment with your values, or saying something to someone else that's not in alignment with your values, then I think that's when the self-awareness can tune in and say, "Oh, I don't know about this thought right now. I'm not
Yes.
too sure about that one."
And during stressful times, do you have any specific book or any favorite book that you always go to find calm and peace?
Oh, there's so many good ones. I love No Mud, No Lotus by Thich Nhat Hanh. That is such a foundational book, in my opinion, because the metaphor of the lotus is so beautiful. It's the lotus flower is a beautiful, stunning flower. When it's all the way open, you can't miss its beauty. And yet, it requires this kind of nasty, muddy, murky stuff in order for its seed to pop open and in order for the flower to grow. So it requires the challenging times in order to grow from them and in order to become even more aligned with your values, even more connected to yourself. And, I see that in this moment we're facing with this pandemic right now. I think that we're seeing this challenging time, this deeply challenging time. And there's also a lot of beauty that's come out of it. There are so many communities I've seen come together and offer free meditations online. There's a lot of people who are really rallying to support the human spirit
Yes.
and to
And
stay in community.
and speaking of challenging times, uh, there is always a bliss beyond the challenging times. We get to stay focused, we get to stay compassionate in those challenging times. I remember this saying from Will Smith: when we get to the maximum tipping point of fear, challenges, there is another world of opportunities and fear. I'm sure I'm paraphrasing here, but there is always a new door to more beyond our fears. If we can just learn to embrace those fears, challenging times, and stick with it and not give up
Exactly. Exactly.
on it, because challenging times are always going to be there and nothing stays forever.
Mm.
All this pandemic, diseases, coronavirus, COVID-19, nothing is going to stay forever. Everything passes. This is the universe. This is how universe works.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's something we notice, right, in meditation when we're sitting and we notice our breath going in and out. We notice that goes. We notice emotions that come in and out. We notice emotion that's really strong will be there for a moment and then it will go. And yet we become so overwhelmed sometimes by these experiences and so panicked that we go out and buy all of the toilet paper in Costco.
Yeah. How do you deal with overwhelm situation in your life?
Same way I deal with stressful situations, as mentioned earlier. I think number one is just taking a deep breath, being able to see clearly the situation. If I'm feeling overwhelmed, I, sometimes if I take a deep breath and I ask the question, what do I need in this moment? Sometimes the answer will be to turn on the music really loud and dance and just
Mm-hmm.
move my body, because I think we can get really stuck and tight and contracted. And sometimes you just need to dance it out a little bit. And so sometimes when I'm overwhelmed, I'll just dance, or I'll take my dog on a walk, get some fresh air. But I think that movement, getting yourself out of the situation you're in is really, really helpful.
And taking a long shower, going for a running, going for a nature walk. It
Yeah.
can be anything that you can enjoy. And this is we are doing this to pattern interrupt. And because when we go
Yes.
back to our usual situation, we go with different mindset, new refreshed mindset.
Exactly.
And I have read your article about body in the mindfulness movement, or where is body in the mindfulness movement. Can you please explain on that? I'm not sure what is it, body in the mindfulness movement.
Well, I think that this article became inspired when one of my teachers, Mark Coleman again, when he said, I think that it shouldn't be called mindfulness, it should be called bodyfulness. And
Interesting.
yeah, and it's so true. When someone says mindfulness and someone hasn't ever heard of it, they think we're just talking about, our brains, or what's from the eyebrows up, what's in our heads, right? But mindfulness is actually an awareness that can span from the crown of our head all the way down to the tips of our toes. And I think that also in long seated meditation silent retreats, which is one of my own personal practices, I also see that there is less of an emphasis on movement. We do have walking meditation periods, but I think that I have a curiosity on how can we bring more body awareness into mindfulness practice. As humans living in the technologically savvy world that we live in, many of us are sitting down at a computer for most hours of the day, and we're not listening to our natural urges, if we need to go to the bathroom or eat or drink water. And mindfulness can help us to bring our awareness back to the body. So I just think the body is such an important part of mindfulness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to know one of your favorite failures where you were able to apply all these mindfulness practices. If any favorite failure comes to your mind,
I
or
think,
setback.
yeah. I honestly have to say, I think it was this one when I was in with the client team, and I just felt like I was the worst meditation teacher ever, because that setback, which I do think that I didn't give the best presentation, and yet it actually put me on this trajectory to deepen my own mindfulness practice with self-compassion. And it helped me to integrate a heartfulness in the practice that I didn't have as much in my teachings at that point. So for me, that's definitely my favorite my favorite setback story.
Setback. Well, This has been an amazing conversation with you, Grace. So
Mm.
before we end this recording, I'm sure our listeners would not let mindfulness teacher to go without teaching any meditation practice.
Oh, great.
So if I have your permission to ask you, would you like to guide us through any of your favorite meditation for next 5 to 10 minutes?
Absolutely, I would be honored.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and take a comfortable seat if we're not comfortable already. You can stay seated or you can lie down on the ground, whatever feels best for you. And just take a few moments to breathe a little bit deeper in through your nose and out through your mouth. And again, in through your nose and out through your mouth. And one last time in through your nose and out through your mouth. And just noticing in this first moment of practice what you're feeling in this moment. So, having just listened to this podcast, maybe there's a swirling mind, lots of thoughts, inspiration. Or maybe you have a stiff body. Or maybe you're feeling a particular emotion. Just taking this first moment to notice what you notice. And then gently bringing your awareness to your breath. Sensing the waves of your breathing coming in and going out. And see if you can identify the area in your body where you feel your breath most prominently. So this could be the tickle of air moving in and out of your nostrils. Could be the rising and falling of your chest. Could be the expansion and the contraction of your belly. Wherever you feel your breath most vividly in this moment, anchor your mind there. So paying attention to this point in your body and returning anytime your mind wanders. You can consider this your home base. And if you notice your mind has wandered, instead of taking that as a moment to be self-critical, recognize that the moment you become aware your mind has wandered is the moment of mindfulness. So it's a moment to delight in. And returning again to the sensation of breath in your body. And inviting this question, what is important now, in this moment? What do I need in this moment? How can I best show up? And letting go of any awareness of the question or awareness of the breath, and just resting for a few more moments. Resting in presence. And closing with the sound of the bell.
Well, thank you so much, Grace, for this amazing guided meditation.
You're welcome. Thank you, Nishant. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this part 2 podcast with Grace. You can follow her work at website www.mindful-grace.com, Instagram @mindful.grace. If you have enjoyed listening to my podcast, please subscribe to the new podcast updates at my website, nishantgarg.me, NISHANTGARG.me, and please provide your reviews on iTunes, which will really help me to get the guests which are hard to get. So thank you again.